Welcome back everybody, my name is Philip and today we're going to talk about HDR photography, or more specifically about a software called Aurora HDR 2018. Now if you're just counting votes whether or not to buy this program, then yes, my vote is a definite yes. If you're interested in a bit more details, to see the interface, to see examples and to get my general recommendation, then stay tuned until after the intro. Okay guys, so let's get a 30 seconds rundown on what HDR actually means. So HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, right? And I have a couple of videos on that. But what essentially it means is if you have an image such as that one, right? Which I just took with my camera, obviously. Now, if I point my camera towards the ground so that the ground is well lit, then I have a problem that the sky is washed out, and vice versa. If I point my camera towards the sky, then I have a problem that the ground is far too dark to actually see all the details. And then of course you can always take the good old shot in between. With HDR photography, you're using techniques to combine these three images to see the actual sky, to see the foreground and everything in between, lit in a way that it still looks natural. Sometimes, some people like it a bit crazy, but at least that everything is properly exposed so that you can see it in the image. So that is what HDR is. You take three images with different exposures, put them together and create one single image. So how would you create these HDR images? How do you get these three and put them together? Well, I mean, if you have a quite modern camera, your camera might just do it by itself without you maybe even realizing. Check your settings. Because cameras are quite smart nowadays. They can easily take three images and put them together. Your phone might actually do the same thing. I think the iPhone 7 and upwards does that automatically, that it takes three images and just pops them together to get to this really nice result. Further, of course, if your camera or your phone doesn't do it automatically and you just get the end result, you might want to consider doing it in a different software. You can do it, for example, in Lightroom itself. Lightroom has some nice capabilities of creating or like merging these three images together. You can do it in Photoshop with a technique called exposure blending, which is also very neat. I'm going to link some methods down in the description. Or you can use some third-party software that is designed to only do this, to only take three images with different exposures and put them together. And Aurora HDR is the one I want to talk about today, because obviously it's relatively new, 2018, still in 2017, but it's really cool, and that's why we have this episode today. Oh, by the way, before we begin, I just want to clarify that I am in no way affiliated with Aurora HDR producers, like MacFun are the guys that produce that thing, and they do not sponsor me. I have nothing to do with them. I just really like their product. That's fair enough, but it's not that they pay me to actually promote that. I'm going to give you my honest opinion and also some negative parts during the way. Now, you may or may not be aware that photographer Trey Ratcliffe, which is one of the, let's say, Earth's most famous HDR photographers out there nowadays, check out his portfolio, he had a great influence on this software because he worked together with the guys to figure out what features should be included in such software and which ones shouldn't. So I think that's why this particular Aurora HDR 2018 is so good. And I know, of course, my words mean nothing until I actually give you examples. So I have just taken this really freshly released Aurora HDR 2018 from 2 days ago, I think. And I've just thrown in a couple of three image sets, right? With the low exposure, the high exposure, and somewhere in between to get the nice overall and amazing HDR look. So I threw them in and I'm going to show you a couple of examples just to see how much I can blow your mind. Let's have a look at this image, for instance, which is somewhere at the coast of Ireland in the north. And while I was there, the sunset was quite stunning, but in one image you're not really able to capture the full beauty, right? Because it just looks so much more stunning when you're there. Now, I've threw it in Aurora HDR, and what happened is I got this image out of it by just combining the three images all together. Let's have a look at another example. In this one, we are in London, and I do love London because especially the scenery around, like all the touristic places, I think it's really cool. And in this case, I got also awesome clouds, but they were a little bit blown out together with the sunset if you just have one image. If you combine the three images in Aurora HDR, however, you get this crazy play of colors, which looks really nice and stunning. Let's do another one or two examples. For example, this one right here is somewhere in the south of Ireland this time. And when I was there, the weather was dull, there wasn't much detail in the sky. It's just really boring. So I threw it into Aurora HDR, and what I got out of it was this. And I mean, holy Jesus, is that amazing. So there are some, actually, you know what? Let's do one more, just because we can. Okay, we have now arrived in Venice, where I was in San Marco at the sunset. It was kinda nice, but not really coming out properly in the image itself. Throw the stuff into Aurora HDR, and that is what you get after. So you can see the software is extremely good in just combining these kind of images to create really awesome stuff. Now, I could obviously go ahead and give you more and more examples of how Aurora HDR can transform images from A to B, but I think these examples I've shown you, they are quite enough, and they have also more on their website, or they just keep it coming. But I think it's good to have a look at the interface itself, just to see if it's extremely complex, is it rather simple, is it something that a beginner in photography should start with, or is it something where you should maybe wait a little bit until you have a better understanding of what is. So let's jump in one example and just look at the interface itself and look at a couple of functions that I find extremely cool, and see how difficult the stuff is to use. The interface, at least as far as I think, is extremely simple. Have a look at the top. The only buttons you really have are buttons with which to open documents, which makes kind of sense. You can zoom in or out into your document, which also makes kind of sense. You can see the before and after, either in a side-by-side comparison like here, or of course, if you feel like, just click on the little eye to see the before and after, like appearing and disappearing. Now you also, and that's the cool thing, you do have a revision history, meaning that while you're editing, the software will actually save every single step you do, just like in Photoshop, and you can go back to a certain point in time if you have to. You then have a crop tool, of course, on the top as well, and you can just freely crop away if that is what you need to do. Let's just remove that again. Cancel. And also, if you look further on the right, all the options that are important for the image itself are on the right here. So you can see you have like dozens of different kinds of sliders. They're just going here from top to bottom. Now, if you're intimidated by that a little bit, well, don't be. There is no need, because there are presets that you can use so that you don't actually have to sort of go in and start, going into every single little slider right here. Let me show you how to get them. So generally, you can find all these presets on the top right here, and you have a button here with a line and 3 dots. Clicking it will make the presets appear, which are now at the bottom. So my workflow that I have established in the last couple of days is I just throw my images there, so in the software, and I'm looking for a preset that kind of like gets me into the right direction. Obviously, I want to do some work myself, but I also don't want to go every single step myself. I don't want to get something that looks close and then just take it over from there and do the fine adjustments by myself. And you can see the software comes with a massive number of presets, can't even load them all in. And you can sort of pick which presets you want to see here by just clicking on this categories button. And you see there are the basic ones, there are some for architecture, indoor, landscape, realistic HDR, specific ones from photographer Trey Radcliffe, as well as Cesar Ramelli. I apologize if I mispronounced that. And also Captain Chemo, which I haven't actually heard of before. I'm going to have to check that one out. So if you want to pick a certain style of presets, you can just go for those, or you go for all presets, of course, if you feel like. So as I said, there are tons and tons that take your image and sort of manipulate it in a way that it looks really cool, colorful, sometimes sad, sometimes happy. Really, there is something for everybody, I think, at least. And once you have picked a preset from the list that is down here, let's actually switch that off for now. Once you have a preset, all these little sliders here will become active for you to choose from. So you can make changes to whatever the preset sets, okay? So if the presets, for instance, would say that the exposure is somewhere in the middle, then you could afterwards go in and decrease that exposure to your liking if that is what you need to do, okay? So in that sense, it's really simple. Get a preset that you like and then take it from there with the sliders on the side. On the side itself, you have different kind of categories that you can use to adjust your image. So for instance, you would have the HDR basic that lets you set things like how bright are the highlights, how dark are the shadows, what's the overall temperature and stuff like that. You have things like the color where you can set the general saturation and vibrance and things like that. Then you can adjust the HDR structure, and I'm just going to do that for now, but I'm most likely not going to keep it. If I increase that to full, it's going to give my image this sort of crunchiness a little bit. It's trying to extract as much detail as possible from the image. So if I were to also increase the microstructure, you can see in the top left-hand corner here, my stuff goes crazy. So I don't really want that. So I'm just gonna use that return button right here. The cool thing is it comes with an HDR denoise. So in essence, it means if you combine 3 images, it happens quite often that you get some grain just because the dark areas have to be brightened up, or the other way around. Now, if that is the case, you have a noise, which is just grainy, pixely stuff somewhere in your image. And this HDR noise is fantastic in reducing it to an amount that it's actually bearable in the image, which is awesome. We have image radiance, kind of cool. It just gets the image a bit more radiance. You have things like the polarizing filter, which makes the sky more blue if you have one. You have the HDR detail boost, which also gives it this typical HDR look. A little bit of glow, where you can essentially make the image glow a bit more. The cool thing is you have the chance to adjust top and bottom on your image separately. Right? So for instance, if you were to have an image with a pretty clear separation between horizon and foreground, then you could use this particular function, I guess, to set a sort of separation between the two. Yeah? So you can turn them, you can do the angle thingy if you need to. And once you have that, you have determined what is up and down. You can then start to work on the top and the bottom part separately to create super cool looks like that. I've actually used that before, just for that particular image. Then for those of you who like it, you have a couple of curves. If that is a bit too advanced, don't worry, just don't use it. And also you have an HSL area where you can adjust the hue, saturation and luminance for each of the different color channels separately, which is awesome, and so on and so forth until you reach the vignetting, just to give the whole thing a bit of a dark edge or a bright edge. So altogether, these are pretty cool functions, but you also find them in Lightroom or anywhere else, right? So it's not a new thing that this is in here. The super cool thing, however, is if I click the button on the top right-hand corner here, which looks like two squares on top of each other, I can bring up my layers panel. Yes, it has layers. I feel like I should mention that again. It has layers. This is amazing. Lightroom has no layers. This one has layers. Layers. Thank God, layers. So layers are awesome. Layers are a principle which most of you know from Photoshop, for example, but it allows you to affect certain areas in the image independent from others. For example, if I were to click on my sort of original layer right here, this is how I started out with before I even started using layers, right? So this is just the basic adjustments. And you can see like all the sliders there are somewhere going crazy, which makes sense. But then I took one layer after the other and added that to the image. So if I switch this one on, and then I switch this one on, and then I have this one to switch on, and lastly I have this one to switch on, which finished my image in that sense. So layers allow you really to take that image and adjust any area you want independent from any other, which I personally have not seen in any other HDR software before, and it's pretty amazing. Another cool function that you have, if you wanted to use it, let's just switch on. You have, of course, your good old histogram here on the top if you need it ever, right? And you also have things like, oops, that's the wrong one. You can, of course, brush the layers you have. Yeah, so if I were to click on that brush here, now I can have a brush and I can sort of select where I wanted to paint stuff in or out, if that is what I wanted to. But you also have something like, let me see, where did it go? Oh yeah, you also have blend modes for your layers. Yes, why not? So here you can adjust, and you might know those from Photoshop, you can adjust what is the blend mode from the current layer you have. Could be normal, could be darken, could be multiply, could be anything. That is amazing that within that you don't just have layers, but you also have blend modes for those layers, just like in Photoshop. And I am loving it so much. Also, something that I find really cool is when you load in your image into Aurora, you have two more buttons available here because it's the first layer. The first one is lens correction. Yes, you can just get rid of distortions, fringing, chromatic aberration, and vignetting from lenses just like that within the actual HDR software, which is quite amazing. Also, if you felt like and you have to transform your image for whatever reason, yes, you of course can do that. Why not? You have vertical, horizontal, I'm just going to switch them on because I can, and this, and rotate, aspect, and offset, and Y offset. Looks super weird, shouldn't have done that, let's cancel that. But the pure fact that you can is quite amazing. Now, it doesn't work with other layers that are on top, it only works with the one that you have in the original kind of sort of base layer, right, with your image itself. But still, that you have this initial opportunity to just change it is really cool. So that was just a quick view at the interface of Aurora HDR 2018. Now I'm absolutely convinced, and this is going to be my new go-to HDR software whenever I use it. And I'm actually using it quite a lot. I'm using HDR techniques in like 80% of all my images, sometimes more subtle and sometimes stronger. But this is truly awesome. I'm a big fan. I'm just using it for 3 days, and I had the sort of basic version before, but the upgrade for me was definitely worth it. Now, can I recommend Aurora HDR for anybody who's beginning currently in photography and editing and stuff like that? Yes, because you do have the presets. The only thing you literally have to do is drag your 3 images into Aurora HDR and look at the presets and find one that you like. And if you do, just export it. If you want, however, it gives you the opportunity to grow with the options, right? So if you want to go in and do the final edits or use layers to just affect certain areas in your image, you definitely can. So is it suited for beginners? Absolutely, 100%. Now the question is it worth the money? Yes. In my personal opinion, it is definitely worth the money. Depending on not if you were able to pre-order, it's between $180 or something like that. So I mean 180, not 180. You get the drift. So it is reasonably cheap for a software that can do it essentially all if you are willing to give it a try. I mean, it does everything you need a good photo editing software to do. It imports RAW, it exports into Photoshop as an example, otherwise of course into JPEG or whatever you need. It has full control over layers and all kinds of aspects of an image, being the hue, saturation, balance, whatever might be in an image, this thing can do it. Just like Lightroom, it has all the functions in there. It's a one-time payment, so you're just paying once, it's no subscription or whatever. And for that, all these things, I'm pretty sure I'm going to use that quite often. And for me, at least, it's definitely worth the money because beginner friendly, but also quite well usable, let's say, for professional work. So in that sense, I give it a strong recommendation. I think there are some things that could be improved potentially. Yeah, sure. I mean, like giving me a little bit of a repair thing just to get rid of dirt and scratches, but that's cool. I get it. You can't do everything at once. So we're kind of getting there. So guys, just a quick tuning in from my side. Is Aurora HDR worth the money, and would I recommend buying it as a beginner or as anybody who does, just likes to do HDR photography? Absolutely. Am I going to use it myself regularly? Absolutely. I'm actually going to put it in these videos way more often now, just in case people start using it, which I kind of expect, then at least they can have some sort of initial help as to how to create their images right here on this channel. So that's going to be it from me, guys. I hope you can have a look at the Aurora HDR, and I hope you definitely enjoy everything you can do with it. And other than that, I shall see you the next time.